I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. Picture yourself sitting in a magnificent theater, watching a movie of your own life. But here's the twist: this version of your life is exactly as you've always dreamed it would be. You're watching yourself living in abundance, feeling deeply loved, radiating confidence, achieving everything you've ever desired. Now, here's what most people don't understand about this image. That person on the screen, living that magnificent life, isn't some future version of you. That person exists right now, in this very moment, in a dimension of consciousness that's just as real as the chair you're sitting in. And the only thing separating you from that reality is a paper-thin veil of belief. You see, I spent decades studying the subconscious mind, and I discovered something that changes everything. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. It can't tell if something happened in the three-dimensional world or in the world of your inner vision. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking. This is the fundamental law of how your mind creates your reality. And today, I'm going to show you the so-called lazy way to manifest, which isn't lazy at all. It's actually the most intelligent, most direct path to transformation that exists. Most people exhaust themselves trying to force things into existence. They hustle, they worry, they manipulate circumstances, they push and strive and burn themselves out. And meanwhile, there's this quiet, elegant method that I call acting as if, where you simply assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and let your subconscious mind do the heavy lifting. Your subconscious is infinitely more powerful than your conscious efforts. It works while you sleep. It orchestrates synchronicities. It draws opportunities to you like a magnet drawing iron filings, but it only responds to one language, the language of feeling. When I tell people to act as if they already have what they desire, I watch their faces transform. Some light up with recognition, others furrow their brows in confusion. How can I act like I'm wealthy when my bank account is empty? How can I act like I'm loved when I'm alone? But they're missing the profound truth hidden in this technique. Acting as if isn't about pretending or lying to yourself. It's about stepping into the state of consciousness where your desire already exists and wearing that state like a comfortable coat. Let me take you deeper into what I mean, because this understanding will change everything for you. Right now, in this very moment, there are infinite versions of reality existing simultaneously. There's a version where you're struggling, there's a version where you're thriving, there's a version where you have perfect health, abundant wealth, beautiful relationships. These aren't fantasies. They're actual states of consciousness, actual arrangements of your inner being, and whichever state you consistently occupy, whichever feeling you make your dwelling place, that's the reality that manifests in your physical world. Your subconscious mind is like soil. It doesn't judge what you plant. It doesn't say, "This is a good seed, I'll grow this one, but this is a bad seed, I'll reject it." No. It simply accepts what you give it and brings forth after its kind. If you plant seeds of lack, worry, and fear, you harvest circumstances that match those feelings. If you plant seeds of abundance, confidence, and love, you harvest a life overflowing with those qualities. And the magnificent news is that you get to choose what you plant, every single moment of every single day. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds too simple. Where's the sacrifice? Where's the hard work? Where's the suffering that surely must precede success? But this is exactly the conditioned thinking that keeps people trapped. We've been taught that achievement requires struggle, that we must earn our good through pain and effort. And while action has its place, the most important work happens in the invisible realm of consciousness. When you change your inner state, your outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match. Think about how you feel when you're absolutely certain something good is about to happen. Maybe you're waiting for a beloved friend to arrive, or you're anticipating a celebration you know will be wonderful. There's this calm excitement, this relaxed anticipation, this feeling of it's already done, I'm just waiting for the physical manifestation. That feeling, that exact inner state, is what I'm inviting you to cultivate about your deepest desires. The man who assumes he is successful doesn't desperately grasp at opportunities. He moves through the world with a quiet confidence that draws success to him. The woman who assumes she is loved doesn't chase affection. She radiates a warmth that makes others want to be near her. The person who assumes they are healthy doesn't obsess over every symptom. They feel vitality flowing through them, and their body responds to that inner conviction. This is not self-deception, this is self-direction. You're not lying to yourself. You're aligning yourself with a higher truth. Because the spiritual reality, the reality of infinite possibility that exists in consciousness, is more real than the temporary conditions you see around you. Those conditions are the outpicturing of your previous states of consciousness. They're old news. They're yesterday's inner weather made visible. But you're not stuck with them. The moment you shift your inner state, you begin creating new conditions. I've watched this principle transform countless lives. I've seen people rise from poverty to prosperity, from sickness to radiant health, from loneliness to beautiful companionship. And in every case, the transformation began not with outer action, but with an inner shift, a decision to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, to act as if the desired state was already real. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how this works. I'm going to share stories that will show you this principle in action. I'm going to give you specific techniques you can use tonight, right before you fall asleep, to impress your subconscious mind with your desires. And I'm going to show you how to sustain this state throughout your day, even when circumstances seem to contradict what you're claiming for yourself, because that's where most people falter. They touch this truth for a moment, then they let the outer world bully them back into their old state. But you're going to be different. You're going to understand that persistence in assumption is the key. You're going to learn how to gently, lovingly return to your desired state every time you drift away from it. And you're going to discover that this so-called lazy way is actually the most powerful method of manifestation that exists, because you're not fighting reality, you're not struggling against what is, you're simply selecting a different channel of consciousness and tuning into it so consistently that it becomes your new default setting. Your subconscious mind is listening right now. It's always listening. And every word you hear, every image you entertain, every feeling you dwell in, is making an impression. So as we continue together, I want you to open yourself to possibility. I want you to suspend your skepticism just long enough to try what I'm suggesting. Because I promise you, when you truly grasp this principle and apply it with faith and persistence, your life will never be the same. The things you've been chasing will begin chasing you. The doors that seemed locked will swing open effortlessly, and you'll look back and wonder why you ever thought life had to be so hard. Let me tell you about what I call the secret of assumption and why it's been hidden in plain sight all along. You see, every single person is already using this principle, whether they know it or not. You're already acting as if something is true about yourself and your life. The question is, what are you assuming? Are you assuming you're capable or incapable? Are you assuming life is friendly or hostile? Are you assuming abundance or lack? Most people have inherited their assumptions from their family, their culture, their past experiences. They're running on autopilot, living out assumptions they never consciously chose. But when you wake up to this principle, everything changes. You realize you have a choice. You can examine your current assumptions and ask, are these serving me? Are these creating the life I actually want? And if the answer is no, you can simply choose different assumptions. You can begin to act as if the life you desire is already yours. Not someday. Not when you deserve it. Not when circumstances align. Right now, this is where people often stumble. They say, but Joseph, isn't that delusional? Isn't that denial of reality? And I tell them, no, it's recognition of a deeper reality. The physical world you see around you, solid and seemingly permanent as it appears, is actually incredibly malleable. It's responsive to consciousness. Quantum physics is now confirming what mystics have known for millennia. The observer affects the observed. Your consciousness isn't separate from reality. It's the very foundation of reality. When you truly understand this, you realize that acting as if isn't about pretending something false is true. It's about aligning yourself with the truth that exists in a higher dimension, the dimension of infinite possibility, and giving that truth permission to manifest in your physical experience. You're not creating something out of nothing. You're selecting from infinite somethings that already exist in potential, and you're selecting through the power of your assumption, through the state of consciousness you choose to inhabit. Now, I want to address something important before we go further. This teaching isn't about bypassing genuine emotions or suppressing real pain. If you're grieving, grieve. If you're angry, feel that anger. This isn't about spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. But here's the key distinction. You can honor your current feelings while simultaneously cultivating a new state to dwell in. You can acknowledge where you are while claiming where you're going. The practice isn't about denial. It's about direction. Think of it like this. Imagine you're standing at the base of a mountain, and your desired life is at the summit. Acknowledging that you're currently at the base isn't negativity. It's honesty. But if you constantly focus on how far you have to go, how steep the climb is, how impossible it seems, you drain yourself of the energy needed for the journey. Instead, what if you could feel, right now, the way you'll feel when you reach the summit? What if you could embody that sense of accomplishment, that joy, that satisfaction? That feeling doesn't weaken you, it energizes you, it pulls you forward, it makes the climb not only possible but inevitable. This is the power of acting as if. You're not denying the current facts, you're refusing to let the current facts have the final word. You're declaring that your inner conviction is more powerful than outer conditions. And when you do this consistently, when you make this your daily practice, you'll witness something that seems miraculous but is actually the natural operation of spiritual law. Your outer world will begin to conform to your inner conviction. I've seen this happen too many times to count. A man came to me once, completely broke, about to be evicted from his apartment. Every fact of his life screamed lack and limitation, but I taught him this principle. I told him, every night before you sleep, feel yourself living in abundance. Don't visualize being rich someday. Feel yourself being prosperous right now. Assume it, wear it, make it your inner reality, and then let it go and sleep in that assumption. He was skeptical, but desperate enough to try. And within 3 weeks, completely unexpected opportunities began flowing to him. A friend called with a job offer. A relative forgave an old debt. Small amounts of money began appearing from forgotten sources. None of these things required his manipulation or control. They emerged naturally, effortlessly, as the outer world rearranged itself to match his new inner state. Within 3 months, he wasn't just paying his rent, he was thriving. The transformation wasn't in his bank account first, it was in his consciousness. He stopped acting as if he was a victim of circumstances and started acting as if he was the creative power in his own life. And the moment he made that shift internally, everything externally began to shift as well. This is the promise I'm making to you today. If you will commit to this practice, if you will persistently assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, if you will act as if you already are what you want to be, you will see changes in your life that will astound you, not because you're special or chosen, but because you're finally working with the law instead of against it. You're finally planting the right seeds in the garden of your subconscious mind. So let's go deeper together. Let me show you exactly how I discovered this principle, how I've seen it work in countless lives, and most importantly, how you can start using it today to create the life you've always known was possible for you. Because it is possible, not someday, not in some distant future, right now. In this very moment, you can begin the most important journey you'll ever take, the journey from believing in lack to knowing your abundance, from feeling separate to experiencing union with infinite possibility, from trying to make things happen to allowing them to happen through you. Your subconscious mind is infinitely powerful, infinitely creative, and infinitely generous. It wants to give you everything you desire, but it can only give you what you accept in consciousness. It can only manifest what you assume to be true. So, if you keep telling yourself that opportunities never come your way, that's exactly what your subconscious will accept as truth. It will work day and night to prove you right. I remember a salesman who came to me years ago, defeated, broken. He told me, "Dr. Murphy, I just can't close deals anymore. Every time I walk into a meeting, I know they're going to say no." And of course they did say no. Every single time. But it wasn't the economy. It wasn't his product. It wasn't even his skill. It was the image he held in his mind. He had programmed his subconscious mind with failure, and his subconscious mind, being the faithful servant it is, manifested that failure into his reality. So we worked together. I taught him to change the mental image. Before every sales call, he would sit quietly, close his eyes, and imagine the meeting going beautifully. He would see the client smiling, nodding, signing the contract. He would feel the handshake, hear the words, "Yes, we'll take it." He did this over and over until that image became more real to him than his fear. Within 3 weeks, his sales began to turn around. Within 2 months, he was the top salesman in his company. Nothing external had changed. The same economy, the same product, the same clients. But everything internal had shifted. He had reprogrammed his subconscious mind, and his outer world had no choice but to follow. This is the law. Consciousness is cause. Everything else is effect. You cannot change the effect by fighting the effect. You cannot improve your circumstances by struggling against your circumstances. You must go to the cause. You must change your consciousness. You must change what you accept as true about yourself and your life. And here's what most people don't understand. Your subconscious mind doesn't care whether what you're impressing upon it is good or bad, true or false, constructive or destructive. It simply accepts. It's completely impersonal. It's like soil. Soil doesn't care whether you plant roses or poison ivy. It will grow whatever seed you plant with equal enthusiasm. Your subconscious is the same way. It accepts whatever you feed it. It doesn't judge. It doesn't say, "Oh, that's a terrible thought, I better not manifest that." No. It simply takes your mental diet and turns it into your physical reality. This is why you must become ruthlessly selective about what you allow into your mind. Not just what you think, but what you read, what you watch, who you spend time with. Every conversation, every scroll through social media, every piece of news, it all leaves an impression on your subconscious mind. Most people are completely unconscious about this. They spend their morning reading headlines designed to trigger fear and anxiety. They have lunch with friends who complain endlessly about their problems. They watch television shows filled with violence and betrayal before bed. Then they wonder why they feel anxious, why their relationships are difficult, why opportunity seems to avoid them. You wouldn't eat garbage and expect to be healthy. Why would you consume mental garbage and expect a beautiful life? Here's what I want you to understand. Your subconscious mind is always working. Right now, even as you're listening to these words, it's processing, creating, attracting. It never sleeps. It never takes a vacation. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is busy turning your habitual thoughts into concrete experiences. That means every moment is an opportunity. Every single thought is a seed. And here's the beautiful part: you can change everything starting right now. You don't need to wait for the right circumstances. You don't need permission. You don't need more education or more money or more time. You simply need to change what you're habitually impressing upon your subconscious mind. I've seen this work in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. I've known people who were destitute, who had every reason to be bitter and defeated, who turned their entire lives around simply by changing their mental diet. I've seen people heal from supposedly incurable conditions. I've seen broken relationships restored. I've seen financial miracles occur when there seemed to be no logical way out. None of this is magic. It's law. It's as reliable as gravity. When you impress your subconscious mind with clear, positive, faithful thoughts about what you desire, it must, by its very nature, bring those things into your experience. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, "But Dr. Murphy, I've tried this. I've visualized. I've said affirmations. And nothing happened." Let me address this directly, because this is where most people stumble, not because the law doesn't work, but because they're working against it without realizing it. You see, it's not enough to simply mouth words or create fleeting mental pictures. The subconscious doesn't respond to casual wishes or half-hearted daydreams. It responds to times feeling asterisk. It responds to conviction. It responds to the emotional tone that accompanies your thoughts. Think of it this way. Imagine you're trying to plant a seed in your garden. You dig a hole, you drop the seed in, you cover it with soil. But then, an hour later, you dig it up to see if it's growing. The next day, you dig it up again. You keep disturbing the soil, checking, doubting, worrying. What happens to that seed? It never gets the chance to take root. It never grows. This is exactly what happens when you plant a desire in your subconscious mind, but then immediately uproot it with doubt. You affirm prosperity in the morning, but by afternoon you're worrying about your bills. You visualize perfect health, but then you spend the rest of the day complaining about your symptoms and expecting the worst. You're giving your subconscious mixed signals, and when there's a conflict between desire and expectation, expectation always wins. The subconscious accepts what you really believe. What you feel to be true at the deepest level, not what you hope for, not what you wish were true, but what you genuinely accept and expect. So the real question becomes, how do you impress your subconscious deeply enough that your desire becomes an accepted reality in your inner world? How do you move from wishing to times knowing asterisk? The answer is through the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You must learn to feel yourself times into times the state of your desire already realized. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now, in your imagination. There's a woman I once knew who understood this principle deeply. She was a talented artist, but for years her paintings gathered dust in a small apartment. She would tell anyone who asked that she longed to have her work displayed in galleries, to be recognized, to make a living from her art. But when I asked her to describe her ideal day as a successful artist, she hesitated. She couldn't see it. Her imagination had become a prison of doubt rather than a canvas of possibility. I gave her one instruction: spend 15 minutes each night before sleep living in the reality of her wish fulfilled, not hoping for it, not praying for it, living it. She closed her eyes and walked through a gallery opening bearing her name. She felt the texture of the invitation cards in her hand. She heard the murmur of collectors discussing her work. She shook hands with gallery owners. She deposited checks. She felt the deep satisfaction of creative recognition. Within 6 months, a series of seemingly coincidental events unfolded. A friend mentioned her work to a curator. That curator happened to be looking for a fresh voice. An exhibition followed, then another. The external world rearranged itself to match the internal pattern she had impressed upon her subconscious mind. Was this luck? Was this chance? No, this was law. The same law that governs the growth of a seed into a tree. You don't plant an acorn and harvest thorns. You plant the mental equivalent of your desire, and you harvest its physical manifestation. But here's where most people stumble. They perform the technique once, maybe twice, and then return to their habitual thinking. They imagine wealth for 5 minutes, then spend the remaining 23 hours and 55 minutes imagining lack. They visualize health briefly, then invest their emotional energy in symptoms and fears. This is like planting a garden in the morning and uprooting the seeds each afternoon to check if they're growing. Persistence is not about effort, it's about fidelity. It's about remaining faithful to your ideal, to your vision, to the state of your wish fulfilled. When contradictory evidence appears in your external world, and it will, you must learn to walk past it as you would walk past shadows when you know the sun is shining. This is why so many people fail, not because the law doesn't work, but because they abandon it at the first sign of resistance. They plant a seed, then dig it up the next day to check if it's growing. They impress their subconscious with a vision of health, then spend the afternoon cataloging their symptoms. They affirm prosperity in the morning, then spend the evening rehearsing their financial limitations with anyone who will listen. Let me be blunt. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot hold the vision of abundance while entertaining thoughts of lack. You cannot claim health while giving your attention and emotion to disease. You cannot affirm love while nursing resentment. The subconscious doesn't respond to what you casually wish for. It responds to what you are faithful to, what you consistently return to, what you emotionally saturate yourself with. Think of your attention as sunlight. Whatever you shine it upon grows. If you shine it upon your problems will flourish. If you shine it upon your lack will multiply. But if you persistently shine it upon your ideal, upon the state of your wish fulfilled, that is what will come to fruition in your world. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but Joseph, I can't just ignore reality. I can't pretend things aren't the way they are. And you're right partially. I'm not asking you to deny facts. I'm asking you to deny them the power to dictate your future. There is a profound difference between acknowledging what is and worshiping what is. When you worry, when you fret, when you give your emotional energy to current circumstances, you are worshiping what is. You are saying, this condition is more real, more powerful than my inner vision. But when you acknowledge the fact without giving it emotional power, when you say, yes, this is the current fact, but I am faithful to a higher truth, you are exercising dominion. You are operating from consciousness, not from conditions. You see, this is the great divide between those who transform their lives and those who remain perpetually trapped in reaction. The transformers understand that their present moment attention is their most precious resource. They guard it jealously. They refuse to squander it on what merely exists when they could be investing it in what they intend to create. Think of your consciousness as a powerful projector. Whatever slide you place in that projector will be cast onto the screen of your experience. If you continuously place slides of lack, limitation, worry, and fear into your consciousness, those images will be projected into your world. You can protest all you want that you don't want these things, but your projection mechanism doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you consistently imagine and feel. This is why I have always taught that feeling is the secret. Not thinking alone, not wishing alone, not hoping alone. Feeling. The emotional conviction that what you desire is already yours. This is what impresses your subconscious mind. This is what sets causation in motion. Let me be very clear about something that often confuses people. When I speak of feeling, I don't mean manufactured emotion. I don't mean forced enthusiasm or fake excitement. I mean the natural feeling that would be yours if your desire were already realized. It's the quiet satisfaction, the inner knowing, the relaxed certainty that comes from assumption. If you desired a sum of money and you suddenly received it, would you go around all day trying to convince yourself you have it? Would you be anxiously repeating affirmations about it? Of course not. You would simply know you have it. There would be a natural ease in your consciousness about it. That ease, that naturalness, that is the feeling I'm speaking of. Most people exhaust themselves trying to feel something spectacular when they should be cultivating something subtle. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's certain. It's done. And here's what happens when you successfully establish this feeling. Your actions begin to change without effort. Your decisions align naturally with your assumption. Opportunities that were always present but invisible to your old state suddenly become apparent. Not because the world changed, but because you changed. Your altered state of consciousness has tuned you to a different frequency, and you now perceive and attract circumstances that match that frequency. This is why I always emphasize that you must persist in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. You cannot assume your desire is realized for a few moments and then return to your old state of lack. That would be like tuning a radio to a beautiful symphony, listening for 30 seconds, then switching back to static and wondering why you're not hearing music. Your consciousness is the dial. Your assumption is the station you're tuned to. And whatever station you hold yourself to consistently and persistently will eventually manifest as your three-dimensional reality. Let me share a profound example that illustrates this principle perfectly. A woman once came to me in desperate financial circumstances. She was behind on rent, had creditors calling daily, and could barely afford food. Every morning she woke to the harsh reality of her situation, and that reality continually impressed itself upon her consciousness. I asked her a simple question. How would you feel if your financial problems were completely solved right now? She closed her eyes and a smile spread across her face. I would feel free, she said. I would feel light. I would sleep peacefully, knowing everything is taken care of. Then that is the state you must live from, I told her, not as a desperate woman hoping for relief, but as a woman whose financial freedom is already established. She protested, as most people do. But Dr. Murphy, how can I feel free when the bills are still here? How can I feel secure when my bank account is empty? And I explained to her what I'm explaining to you now. The feeling must come first. The assumption precedes the manifestation. You don't wait for your circumstances to change before you change your state. You change your state, and your circumstances must follow. This is why so many people remain trapped in their circumstances. They're waiting for proof before they believe. They're waiting for the money to appear before they feel wealthy. They're waiting for the relationship to manifest before they feel loved. They're waiting for the healing before they feel whole. But that's not how this law works. You must reverse the order entirely. Feel it now. Assume it now. Live from the end now. I know what you're thinking. But Joseph, how can I feel wealthy when my bank account is empty? How can I feel healthy when my body is in pain? How can I feel successful when I'm surrounded by failure? And here's my answer. You must make a distinction between what is real and what is factual. The facts are temporary. The facts are the current conditions of your three-dimensional world. The facts are what your senses report to you. But reality, true reality, is what exists in your imagination, in your consciousness, in the state you choose to occupy. The facts said that I would never amount to anything. The facts said I had no formal education, no connections, no advantages. But the reality I assumed was different. I saw myself as a teacher, as someone who helped thousands transform their lives. And because I persisted in that assumption, The facts had to rearrange themselves to match my inner reality. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending. This is the scientific application of a universal law. When you assume a state and persist in it, you impress that state upon your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, well, that's not true. It simply accepts what you persistently assume to be true and begins to externalize it in your world. Your subconscious mind is the builder. It takes the blueprint you give it through your assumptions and constructs your reality accordingly. If you give it a blueprint of lack, struggle, and limitation, that's what it will build. If you give it a blueprint of abundance, ease, and possibility, that's what it will manifest. But you must be consistent. You cannot spend 23 hours assuming poverty and 1 hour assuming wealth and expect the wealth to manifest. The dominant assumption wins. Always. This is where most people fail. They attempt the technique once or twice, they think positive thoughts for a few moments, and when nothing changes immediately, they return to their old assumptions. They say, see, it doesn't work. But they never gave it a genuine test. They never maintained the state long enough for it to harden into fact. They dip their toe in the water once, feel the cold, and declare that swimming doesn't work. But you're different. You're reading this because something in you knows there's more. You've glimpsed the possibility. And now you're ready to stop testing and start living times from the assumption that it's already done. Here's what changes everything. The realization that your assumption doesn't need permission from the outer world to be valid. You don't need a sign. You don't need confirmation. You don't need 3 synchronicities and a burning bush to tell you that what you've assumed is true. The moment you assume it, it is times true in the only place that matters, in consciousness. And consciousness is the only reality. Everything else is just shadow, just effect, just the delayed print of what was already developed in the dark room of your inner world. I've watched people transform their entire existence by grasping this one principle. A woman came to me once, drowning in debt, creditors calling daily. She had $11 in her purse. She asked me, how can I possibly assume I'm wealthy when everything around me screams poverty? I told her, the question itself reveals your mistake. You're waiting for wealth to appear so you can times feel wealthy. But that's backwards. You must feel wealthy times first asterisk, and the wealth follows. It has no choice. It's law. She fought me on it, naturally. The human mind loves its logic, its cause and effect, its demand for proof before belief. But finally, she surrendered to the experiment. Every night before sleep, she inhabited the feeling of financial freedom. Not by imagining piles of money that's too abstract, too distant from feeling. Instead, she felt the times relief asterisk. The ease, the inner calm of knowing every bill was handled, every need met. She felt the quiet satisfaction of financial security. She didn't analyze how it would come. She didn't strategize or scheme. She simply assumed the state and refused to abandon it, no matter what the mailbox brought the next day. Within 3 weeks, everything shifted. An old insurance policy she'd forgotten about matured. A relative offered her a position in a business. A debt she thought was permanent was suddenly forgiven due to a clerical error discovered in her favor. One by one, the outer world rearranged itself to match her inner assumption, not because she manipulated anything externally, but because she changed the lens through which reality was being projected. This is the principle operating in your life right now, whether you're aware of it or not. Your current circumstances are not random. They're not punishment. They're not luck. They're the faithful echo of your dominant mental dwelling place. The world you see is the world you are. And here's where it gets truly liberating. If you created your current reality unconsciously, imagine what you can create when you do it consciously. When you deliberately choose what you assume to be true about yourself and your world. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change their circumstances directly. They push, they struggle, they fight against what is. They try to force doors open that seem locked. They exhaust themselves battling conditions that feel immovable. And all the while, they're watering the very roots of what they're trying to eliminate. You cannot solve a problem on the level it was created. Einstein knew this. You cannot change the harvest by rearranging the fruit on the tree. You must change the seed. You must change the assumption from which your experiences grow. Let me give you another example. I once knew a man who was convinced that opportunity had passed him by. He was in his 50s, and he carried this heavy assumption that his best years were behind him, that the world belonged to younger people, that doors were closing rather than opening. This assumption colored everything. When he met new people, he positioned himself as winding down rather than ramping up. When opportunities arose, he hesitated, assuming he wasn't really the right fit. His entire energy communicated a man in decline, and the world, as it always does, confirmed his assumption. He was passed over, overlooked, dismissed. Then something shifted, not in his circumstances, but in his assumption. He began to assume, despite all evidence to the contrary, that he was entering his most powerful and creative years, that his experience was an asset, not a liability, that the best was not behind him but ahead of him. Within 6 months, that man's entire energy had shifted. His posture changed, his voice carried authority again, and though nothing had happened yet in the outer world, people began responding to him differently. The universe was already preparing his comeback before his phone ever rang. This is the power of assumption meeting persistent revision. You are not simply thinking positive thoughts, you are fundamentally altering the record that consciousness is playing. You are changing the signal you broadcast into the invisible field of possibility. Now let us address the objection I hear most frequently. Someone will say, "Dr. Murphy, I have tried all of this. I have affirmed. I have visualized. I have assumed. And nothing has changed. Where is my manifestation?" I ask you this question in return. Have you truly persisted, or have you merely dabbled? Have you maintained your assumption through the silence, through the waiting, through the moments when every sense screamed at you that nothing was working? Most people give their subconscious mind a suggestion once, twice, perhaps a dozen times. Then they expect immediate results. But consider this: your current circumstances were not created in a day or a week. They were impressed upon your subconscious through years, perhaps decades, of repeated thoughts, feelings, and assumptions. You cannot overwrite a lifetime of programming with a handful of affirmations spoken half-heartedly while your attention wanders. You must become relentless. You must saturate your consciousness with your new assumption until it becomes more real to you than the evidence of your senses. I knew a woman who wanted to heal a relationship with her sister. They had not spoken in 7 years. The hurt ran deep. The silence seemed permanent. Every mutual friend said it was hopeless. This woman came to understand the principle of revision. Every night before sleep, she would replay past conversations with her sister. But she would revise them. Where there had been harsh words, she imagined tenderness. Where there had been blame, she imagined understanding. Where there had been separation, she imagined connection. She did this not once, not twice, but every single night for months. And here's what happened. Slowly, incrementally, something began to shift. Not in her family at first, but in her. The tension she had carried in her shoulders began to ease. The knot in her stomach loosened. She found herself sleeping better, breathing deeper. The mental rehearsals she was doing weren't just changing her imagination, they were changing her nervous system, her emotional responses, her entire state of being. Then came the family gathering, the one she'd been dreading. And something remarkable occurred. When her father began his usual pattern, she found herself responding differently. Not because she had planned what to say, but because she had become different. The words that came out of her mouth were calm, clear, and kind but firm. She set a boundary she had never set before. And she did it without anger, without that desperate need for approval that had always driven her interactions. Her father was surprised. Her mother was stunned. But what surprised her most was this: they actually listened. The pattern that had repeated for decades finally broke because she had changed the only variable she had control over herself. Within months, the relationship began to transform. Not perfectly real life rarely offers perfect resolutions, but meaningfully, profoundly. The family dinners became less tense. Conversations deepened. Apologies were offered. Understanding grew. All because one person decided to use the greatest power available to any human being: the power to choose what you hold in your imagination. Now, you might be thinking this sounds too simple. You might be saying, "But my situation is different, more complicated, more painful," and perhaps it is. I'm not suggesting that imagination is a magic wand that instantly dissolves all difficulties. What I am telling you is that it is the starting point for every single change that will ever occur in your life. You cannot outperform your self-image. You cannot create in the outer world what you refuse to acknowledge in the inner world. Your imagination is the workshop where your future is being constructed right now, in this very moment. The question is not whether you're imagining, you're always imagining. The question is, what are you imagining? Are you imagining failure or success? Poverty or abundance? Sickness or health? Conflict or harmony? Whatever you're persistently imagining, whatever you're giving your mental and emotional energy to, that is what you're inviting into your experience. Now, I want you to understand something that might seem counterintuitive at first. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a real experience and one that's vividly imagined. This is crucial. When you imagine something with feeling, with conviction, with sensory detail, your subconscious accepts it as real. It begins to work on making that mental image a physical reality. Think about this for a moment. When you watch a frightening movie, your heart races, your palms sweat, your breathing quickens. Why? Because even though you know intellectually that it's just a film, just actors on a screen, your subconscious responds to the images as if they were real. The fear you feel is genuine. The physical response is genuine. This same principle works in your favor when you consciously direct your imagination toward what you want. When you see yourself healthy, prosperous, successful, happy, when you feel these states as already accomplished, your subconscious begins to align your entire being with that reality. But here's where most people stumble. They imagine what they want for a few minutes, then spend the rest of their day imagining what they don't want. They worry. They rehearse arguments. They picture failure. They anticipate disappointment, and then they wonder why their lives don't change. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot build up with one hand while tearing down with the other. Your imagination must be disciplined, directed, consistent. I'm not saying you need to imagine perfectly every moment of every day. That's not realistic. What I am saying is that you need to establish a dominant mental attitude. Your prevailing mood, your habitual thoughts, your persistent imaginings, these are what shape your world. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you're seeking employment. You can approach this in two ways. The first way is to anxiously wonder if you'll find work, to fear rejection, to imagine yourself failing interviews, to worry about your financial situation. This approach impresses your subconscious with lack, inadequacy, and failure. The second way is to imagine yourself already employed in the ideal position. You see yourself doing meaningful work. You feel the satisfaction of contributing your talents. You sense the security and abundance that comes with this position. You hear congratulations from others. You make this mental movie vivid and real, and you return to it regularly with feeling. I have witnessed countless individuals transform their professional lives through this exact method. A woman came to me struggling to advance in her field of accounting. She had the qualifications, the experience, yet something invisible held her back. I instructed her to build a mental scene of sitting at a larger desk, in a corner office, reviewing important documents with her name on the door plaque. Every night before sleep, she entered this scene fully. She felt the leather chair beneath her, smelled the fresh flowers on her desk, heard her title spoken with respect. Within 3 months, a reorganization created exactly the position she had been visualizing, and she was offered it without even applying. This is not manipulation of external forces. This is alignment with spiritual law. Your subconscious mind is connected to infinite intelligence, and when you impress it with clear, feeling-filled images, it moves to make those images manifest in your outer world. It knows no limitations. It does not argue or question. It accepts what you give it and works tirelessly to bring it about. Now let me address something many people struggle with: the gap between your current circumstances and your desired state. This gap can feel overwhelming. You look at your present reality, and it seems to contradict everything you are visualizing. You are living in a small apartment but imagining a beautiful home. You are working an entry-level job but visualizing executive leadership. The outer facts seem to shout that your vision is foolish. This is where faith becomes essential, and I do not mean blind faith, but understanding of how consciousness operates. The spiritual realm moves first, then the material world follows. You must persist in your inner conviction regardless of external appearances. The Bible tells us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Your mental image, held with feeling and conviction, is the actual substance from which your future materializes. Think of it this way. When an architect designs a building, the blueprint comes before the construction. The blueprint is not the building, yet the building cannot exist without it. Your visualization is your blueprint. The workers, materials, and circumstances will arrange themselves according to your mental design, but you must hold firm to that design even when the construction site looks chaotic. I knew a man who was deeply in debt and could barely afford necessities. Yet he began to visualize himself debt-free, writing checks with ease, feeling prosperous and generous. His outer world showed him bills and collection notices. Everything visible contradicted his vision. But he persisted. For 3 weeks, he repeated this mental exercise twice a day, morning and evening, without fail. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He didn't argue with the circumstances. When people spoke of his financial troubles, he simply smiled and changed the subject. And then something extraordinary happened. A former colleague reached out to him unexpectedly. They'd lost touch years ago, but somehow his name came up in a business conversation. This colleague was starting a new venture and needed someone with his exact skills. The salary offered was double what he'd been visualizing. When the opportunity arrived, he recognized it immediately. It felt familiar, like something he'd already experienced, because in his imagination, he had. This is the secret that transforms wishful thinking into creative power. Your subconscious mind doesn't work with vague hopes or desperate pleas. It works with clear mental images saturated with feeling. When you give it a definite pattern, it goes to work immediately, reorganizing circumstances, attracting opportunities, and guiding you toward the fulfillment of that pattern. I've watched this principle operate in every area of human life: health, relationships, career success, creative achievement. The mechanics are always the same. First comes the desire, then comes the mental image. Then comes the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and finally comes the manifestation in physical reality. But here's where most people stumble. They create the mental image once or twice, then abandon it the moment contradictory evidence appears. They plant the seed, then dig it up every day to see if it's growing. They treat visualization like a magic trick that should work instantly, and when results don't appear within 48 hours, they conclude the whole thing is nonsense. This is exactly backwards. Your subconscious mind needs repetition and consistency. It learns through impression, and impression requires frequency. When you repeatedly impress your subconscious with a clear mental image, accompanied by the feeling of reality, you're creating deep grooves in consciousness. You're establishing new patterns that eventually become automatic. Think of it like learning to drive. At first, every action requires conscious effort. You think about the steering wheel, the pedals, the mirrors, but with repetition, these actions become automatic. Your subconscious takes over, and you drive without thinking. The same principle applies to manifesting your desires. When you repeatedly impress an idea upon your subconscious mind, it accepts it as true and begins to execute it automatically. This is why affirmations work. This is why visualization works. This is why consistent mental practice transforms your reality. Let me share something profound with you. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a real experience and one vividly imagined. Scientists have proven this through countless experiments. When you imagine yourself succeeding, your brain fires the same neural pathways as when you actually succeed. Your body releases the same chemicals, your nervous system responds identically. This is why athletes use mental rehearsal. A basketball player who visualizes making free throws improves almost as much as one who physically practices. A pianist who mentally practices a piece strengthens the same neural connections as physical practice would. Your subconscious accepts the imagined experience as real and begins to coordinate your actions toward making it manifest in physical reality. Think about this carefully. Every single thing you see around you right now, the chair you're sitting on, the device you're using to watch this, the building you're in, everything began as an invisible thought in someone's mind. Before these objects existed physically, they existed mentally. The thought came first. The manifestation followed. You are doing this constantly, whether you realize it or not. You're always impressing thoughts upon your subconscious. The question is, are you doing it deliberately or accidentally? Are you impressing thoughts of success, health, and abundance? Or are you unconsciously impressing thoughts of fear, limitation, and lack? Most people are architects of their own limitations. They spend their mental energy worrying about what they don't want. They vividly imagine failure. They rehearse conversations where things go wrong. They picture themselves struggling and suffering. And then they wonder why these very things keep showing up in their lives. Your subconscious doesn't judge your thoughts. It doesn't say, "This is a good thought, I'll manifest this one. This is a bad thought, I'll ignore it." Your subconscious is neutral. It accepts whatever you consistently feed it and works tirelessly to make it real. This is actually wonderful news, because it means you have complete control. You can begin right now to consciously direct your mental energy. Let me show you exactly how to do this. The practice I'm about to share with you is deceptively simple, but it has transformed millions of lives. I've seen it work for the factory worker and the millionaire, for the sick and the healthy, for the desperate and the ambitious. Here's what you do. Before you go to sleep each night, you enter into a state of drowsiness. That twilight zone between waking and sleeping is absolutely golden. In this state, your conscious mind begins to relax its grip, and your subconscious becomes incredibly receptive. This is your opportunity. Now, in this drowsy state, you don't argue or force. You don't wrestle with yourself. You simply repeat a short, positive phrase that embodies your desire already fulfilled. Not "I will be healthy," not "I want to be prosperous," but "I am healthy, I am prosperous, I am peaceful." Present tense. Already done. You repeat this gently, like a lullaby. There's no strain, no effort, just quiet, peaceful repetition as you drift off to sleep. And here's what happens. These words sink deep into your subconscious mind during the night. Your subconscious works on them while you sleep, accepting them as instructions, as blueprints for your reality. I remember a woman who came to my lectures, suffering from chronic insomnia and anxiety. She'd tried everything: medication, therapy, relaxation techniques. Nothing worked for long. I taught her this simple method. Every night as she lay in bed, she would repeat, "I sleep peacefully. I wake refreshed. All is well." The first few nights, her conscious mind protested. It said, "This is ridiculous. You're not sleeping peacefully. Look at you, wide awake." But she persisted gently without force. Within 2 weeks, her sleep had normalized. Within a month, her anxiety had diminished dramatically. She didn't fight her condition. She simply impressed a new pattern upon her subconscious mind. This is the secret that the mystics knew, that every spiritual tradition has taught in its own language. You become what you contemplate. You embody what you feel to be true. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge your instructions, it simply executes them with absolute fidelity. This is why the quality of your inner dialogue matters more than you might imagine. The conversations you have with yourself, the thoughts you entertain habitually, the feelings you allow to dominate your emotional landscape, these are the instructions you're giving to the most powerful creative force within you. When you consistently think thoughts of limitation, your subconscious accepts this as your sincere desire. When you repeatedly feel unworthy, your deeper mind interprets this as the state you wish to experience. It doesn't argue. It doesn't counsel you toward better choices. It simply says, "Your wish is my command," and begins orchestrating circumstances that match your dominant mental attitude. This is both sobering and liberating. Sobering because it places the responsibility squarely on your shoulders. You cannot blame external circumstances for the conditions of your life when you understand that those circumstances are the outpicturing of your habitual thinking. But it's liberating because it means you hold the master key. You are not at the mercy of fate, chance, or the whims of others. You are the architect of your experience. I've watched people transform their entire lives by making one fundamental shift. They stopped being casual observers of their thought life and became vigilant guardians of their mental house. They began to challenge every thought of lack, every feeling of inadequacy, every assumption of limitation. They asked themselves repeatedly, "Is this the instruction I want to give my subconscious mind? Is this the blueprint I want my deeper intelligence to follow?" The moment you take responsibility for your inner world, everything changes. You stop arguing for your limitations and start claiming your possibilities. You stop rehearsing your fears and start embodying your faith. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a creator of conditions. Your subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant, whether they be seeds of abundance or seeds of scarcity, seeds of health or seeds of illness, seeds of joy or seeds of sorrow, will grow and multiply. The soil doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say, "I'll grow the good seeds but reject the bad ones." It accepts all seeds equally, and brings forth a harvest corresponding to what was planted. This is why Jesus taught in parables about sowing and reaping. He understood this fundamental spiritual law. As you sow in consciousness, so shall you reap in experience. Paul echoed this truth when he wrote, "Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." This isn't moral judgment, it's spiritual mechanics. Think of it this way. Your subconscious mind is like a garden that never sleeps. It's always accepting seeds, always growing something. The question isn't whether your garden is productive, it's what you're planting in it. Every thought is a seed. Every belief is a seed that will grow into your tomorrow. Now, I meet people who say, "But Dr. Murphy, I've been thinking positive thoughts for weeks, and nothing has changed." And here's what I tell them. You're looking at the surface of the garden too soon. A farmer doesn't plant corn and then dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. He plants the seed, waters it, protects it from weeds, and trusts the natural process. Your thoughts are the same way. When you plant a new idea in your subconscious mind, let's say prosperity, health, or confidence, it doesn't manifest instantly. There's a gestation period. There's a time of invisible growth happening beneath the surface of your awareness. This is where most people fail. They plant the seed of a new belief, but before it can take root, they dig it up with doubt. They water it with fear. They allow the weeds of negative thinking to choke it out. The Bible speaks of this in the parable of the sower. Some seeds fell by the wayside and were devoured by birds. Some fell on rocky ground and withered because they had no depth of earth. Some fell among thorns and were choked, but the seeds that fell on good soil prepared, receptive soil brought forth fruit, some 30-fold, some 60-fold, some 100-fold. Your consciousness is that soil. And the quality of your harvest depends entirely on the condition of your mental and emotional soil. Is your mind prepared to receive new ideas? Or is it hardened by cynicism, cluttered with doubt, overgrown with the thorns of resentment and fear? Before you plant a single seed of desire, you must prepare the ground. You must clear away the debris of past disappointments. You must pull up the weeds of self-doubt that have taken root over years of negative conditioning. You must break up the hardened soil of limiting beliefs that were planted in your mind by well-meaning but misguided voices from your past. This preparation is not optional, it is essential. I have seen countless individuals attempt to plant magnificent dreams in polluted soil and then wonder why nothing grows. They affirm prosperity while their subconscious is saturated with poverty consciousness. They visualize perfect health while harboring deep resentment toward their bodies. They declare confidence while replaying every past failure like a broken record in their minds. The subconscious mind is literal. It accepts what you habitually feed it. If you spend 20 minutes visualizing success and 23 hours dwelling on limitation, which do you think will prevail? Your dominant mental attitude determines your experience, not your occasional positive thought. Let me be direct with you. Preparing your mental soil requires honesty, brutal, unflinching honesty about what you've been allowing to take root in your consciousness. What do you think about most? What do you say when you talk to yourself? What stories do you tell about your life, your capabilities, your past, your future? Many people live in what I call the museum of their mistakes. They conduct daily tours through every failure, every rejection, every painful experience, examining each one with reverent attention, preserving them carefully in the formaldehyde of constant remembrance. And then they wonder why their present remains trapped in the patterns of their past. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one vividly imagined. Every time you replay a painful memory with emotional intensity, you are living it again. You are re-traumatizing yourself. You are watering dead plants and expecting your garden to bloom. The work of mental preparation means you must become selective about what you allow into your consciousness. You must guard the gateway of your mind as vigilantly as you would guard the entrance to your home. Would you allow someone to dump garbage in your living room? Then why do you permit toxic thoughts to pile up in your mental space? Every thought you accept becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind, and like any garden, what grows there depends entirely on what you plant. If you plant seeds of doubt, fear, and limitation, you will harvest a life of struggle and disappointment. But if you plant seeds of faith, abundance, and possibility, you will reap a harvest beyond your wildest dreams. This is why I tell you, become a conscious gardener of your mind. You cannot prevent birds from flying over your head, but you can certainly prevent them from building nests in your hair. Similarly, you cannot stop negative thoughts from appearing, but you can refuse to give them residence in your consciousness. When a negative thought knocks at the door of your mind, acknowledge it, then firmly replace it with its positive opposite. If fear says you will fail, immediately counter with, I am divinely guided to success. If doubt whispers, you're not good enough, speak back with conviction. I am a perfect expression of infinite intelligence, and I am enough exactly as I am. This is not denial. This is not pretending problems don't exist. This is the sacred practice of choosing which thoughts deserve your mental energy and which should be dismissed. You are not running from reality, you are creating it. I have seen people transform terminal diagnoses into complete healings through this practice. I have witnessed bankrupt individuals become millionaires by changing their mental conversation about money. I have watched broken relationships restored when one person decided to stop rehearsing grievances and start affirming love and harmony. The principle is always the same. What you dwell upon grows. What you focus on expands. What you give your attention to multiplies in your experience. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge. It doesn't say, this thought is good for you or that thought will harm you. It simply accepts what you consistently think and feel, then works tirelessly to bring it into manifestation. It is the most faithful servant you will ever have, but it must be given the right instructions. Right now, pause and ask yourself, what have I been instructing my subconscious to create? What dominant thoughts have I been feeding it day after day? Am I programming it for success or failure, for health or sickness, for abundance or lack? These are the questions that determine the quality of your life. Because your subconscious doesn't judge, it doesn't argue, it simply accepts what you consistently feed it and sets about making it real. I've watched people transform their entire existence by making one simple shift. They stopped being passive consumers of their own thoughts and became active directors of their mental programming. They stopped letting the world dictate what went into their subconscious mind and started choosing deliberately. Let me give you something practical right now, something you can use immediately. Before you fall asleep tonight, you're in the most suggestible state you'll experience all day. Your conscious mind is relaxing its grip. Your critical faculty is winding down. The gateway to your subconscious is wide open. What are you going to plant in that fertile soil? Most people plant worry. They replay the problems of the day. They run through tomorrow's anxieties. They rehearse conversations they wish they'd handled differently. And then they wonder why they wake up tired, anxious, and defeated before the day even begins. Here's what I want you to do instead. In those precious moments before sleep, when you're drowsy and receptive, give your subconscious a clear instruction. Something simple, something specific, something you can feel. You might say, I am waking up refreshed, energized, and filled with creative ideas. Don't just say it mechanically, feel it. Imagine that version of yourself tomorrow morning. See yourself rising with energy. Feel the vitality in your body. Sense the clarity in your mind. Your subconscious is listening, and it will work all night long to make that image real. Or perhaps you're facing a challenge at work, a difficult project, a conflict with a colleague. Before sleep, instead of worrying about it, instruct your subconscious. My deeper mind is revealing the perfect solution to this situation. I am guided to say and do the right thing. Then let it go. Trust the process. Your subconscious has access to infinite intelligence. It knows things your conscious mind cannot grasp. It sees connections you cannot see. And when you ask it properly, it delivers answers in ways that will astound you. I cannot count the number of times people have told me, Dr. Murphy, I woke up and the answer was just there. It was so obvious. Why didn't I see it before? Because your conscious mind was in the way. Your conscious mind was too busy being anxious, too busy trying to force a solution. When you stepped aside and let your subconscious work, the answer emerged naturally. This is not wishful thinking. This is not fantasy. This is applied psychology, the practical use of a law that governs your mind. The law I'm speaking of is simple. Your subconscious mind accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and conviction. It does not argue. It does not question. It simply accepts and acts upon the dominant impression. When you say, I can't afford this, your subconscious accepts that as an instruction. When you say, money comes to me easily and naturally, with feeling behind those words, your subconscious accepts that as well. It's neutral, it's impartial, it responds to the nature of your thought. Now, Here's where many people stumble. They try this for a day, maybe 2 days, and when nothing appears to change, they throw up their hands and say, "See? It doesn't work." But tell me, if you planted a seed in your garden and came back the next morning demanding to see a full-grown tree, would you be thinking rationally? Of course not. You understand that growth takes time. You understand that beneath the surface, unseen forces are at work. The same principle applies to the garden of your mind. You must give your subconscious time to work. You must remain faithful to the impression you're making. This is why I emphasize feeling. You can repeat words mechanically 1,000 times and get no result. But speak those same words once with deep conviction, with the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you set powerful forces in motion. Let me give you a practical technique. Before you sleep tonight, enter into a drowsy, relaxed state. This is when your subconscious is most receptive. In that state, imagine yourself in a scene that would naturally occur if your desire were already fulfilled. If you want financial freedom, see yourself handling your bills with ease, feeling the relief, the comfort, the security. If you want health, feel the vitality in your body. Make it real in your imagination. Don't imagine the process of getting there. Imagine the end result. Live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Do this night after night until it becomes natural to you, until it feels more real than your current circumstances. Your subconscious will then begin to express this impression as objective reality. Many of you come to me with the same question. Dr. Murphy, how long will this take? When will I see my demonstration? And I understand this question. You're eager. You're hopeful. You want confirmation that this works. But here's what I must tell you. The moment you ask when with anxiety, you've stepped out of the wish fulfilled. You see, when you truly possess something, you don't anxiously wonder when it will arrive. You already have it. Think about the money in your bank account right now. Do you wake up each morning desperately asking, when will I have this money? When will it come? Of course not. It's already there. You accept it as fact. This is the feeling you must cultivate about your desire. The timeline isn't determined by some external force or cosmic calendar. It's determined by the firmness of your conviction and the constancy of your feeling. Some demonstrations happen overnight. Others unfold over weeks or months. But the timing is always perfect because your subconscious knows exactly when and how to bring your desire into manifestation. I've seen people receive their demonstrations within days because they assumed the feeling so completely that there was no room for doubt. I've also seen people delay their good for years because they kept looking at their current circumstances and contradicting their inner assumption with their outer observation. Your job is not to figure out the timeline. Your job is to remain faithful to your assumption regardless of what appears in your external world. This is what the mystics called faith. Not blind belief, but loyal commitment to your inner conviction despite contrary evidence. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You trust the process. You water it, give it sunlight, and allow nature to do its work. Your assumption is the seed. Your feeling is the water and sunlight. And your persistence is the patience that allows the harvest to come in its own perfect time. You've been faithful to the invisible reality of your answered prayer. You've assumed it's done. You've felt it real. Now all that's left is to walk with the calm assurance that what you've planted must bear fruit. And here's what happens in that state of patience. Life begins to orchestrate itself around your assumption. Doors open that you didn't even knock on. People appear with exactly what you need. Opportunities arise that seem almost miraculous. But they're not miracles in the sense of breaking natural law. They're the natural outcome of your faithful assumption meeting the creative power of your subconscious mind. This is what I mean when I say that your consciousness is the only reality. When you change your inner state, the outer world has no choice but to reflect that change. It may not happen instantly. The physical world operates on a different timetable than the inner world. But it happens with the same certainty that an acorn becomes an oak tree. So when you're tempted to rush, when you're tempted to force, when you're tempted to manipulate circumstances to make things happen, pause, breathe, return to your assumption, feel its reality again, and then release it with trust. Remember, impatience is really a form of doubt. It says, maybe this won't work. Maybe I need to do more. Maybe I need to try harder. But true faith doesn't try. True faith rests in the knowing that it is already done. Think of it this way. When you mail a letter, you don't stand by the mailbox wondering if it will reach its destination. You don't dig it back up to check if it's still there. You simply trust the postal system to do its job. You assume the letter will arrive, and you go about your day. Your desires work the same way. Once you've impressed them on your subconscious mind with feeling and faith, once you've assumed their reality with conviction, you can release them. The universal intelligence that governs all things will handle the details. Your job is simply to maintain the consciousness of the wish fulfilled. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you truly let go, the moment you stop grasping and start trusting, that's when things begin to move quickly. Because now there's no resistance. Now your conscious mind isn't interfering with the creative process. Now you're in alignment with the natural flow of manifestation. This is the art of living by imagination rather than by force. You see, most people live their lives backwards. They wait for the physical world to change before they allow themselves to feel successful. They say, I'll feel abundant when the money comes. I'll feel confident when I get the promotion. I'll feel loved when the right person arrives. But this is putting the cart before the horse. This is trying to harvest before you've planted. The feeling must come first. The assumption must precede the evidence. Think of it this way. You cannot get rich by constantly feeling poor. You cannot attract health by dwelling in the feeling of sickness. You cannot build loving relationships by remaining in the consciousness of loneliness. The outer world is only reflecting back to you what you're broadcasting from within. So here's what I want you to understand with crystal clarity. Your job is not to manipulate circumstances. Your job is not to figure out all the steps. Your job is not to force doors open through sheer willpower. Your job is simply to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and maintain that assumption until it hardens into fact. When you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. Doors begin to open that you never knew existed. People appear with exactly what you need. Opportunities present themselves as if by magic. Coincidences pile up in your favor. The universe begins to rearrange itself to match your inner conviction. I've seen this happen thousands of times. The businessman who assumed the feeling of success before he had any evidence, and within months found himself surrounded by profitable opportunities. The woman who lived in the feeling of perfect health despite her diagnosis, and experienced what doctors called a miraculous recovery. The artist who dared to feel successful before selling a single piece, and suddenly found galleries competing for his work. These aren't special people with special powers. They simply understood this one fundamental truth. Consciousness is the only reality. And once you understand this, once you really grasp that your consciousness is creating your entire experience of life, everything changes. You stop being a victim of circumstances. You stop waiting for the world to change before you can be happy. You stop believing that you need permission from external conditions to feel the way you want to feel. Instead, you become the deliberate creator of your experience. You realize that every single moment is an opportunity to choose your state of consciousness, to select the feeling you want to embody, to decide who you're going to be regardless of what's happening around you. This is true freedom. Not freedom from challenges or difficulties, but freedom to choose your response to them. Freedom to maintain your desired state even when the evidence seems to contradict it. Freedom to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. And here's what happens when you live this way consistently. You begin to notice that life itself seems to reorganize around your consciousness. The synchronicities multiply. The right people appear at the right time. The resources you need become available. The doors that were closed suddenly open. Not through struggle or force, but through alignment. Your subconscious mind, which controls approximately 95% of your thoughts, behaviors, and actions, begins to work entirely in your favor. It accepts the new beliefs you've impressed upon it through feeling and repetition, and it starts to orchestrate your life according to these new instructions. You'll find yourself thinking thoughts you've never thought before, thoughts that lead to the fulfillment of your desire. You'll be inspired to take actions that would never have occurred to you in your old state of consciousness. You'll make decisions that seem small in the moment but turn out to be pivotal turning points. This is the subconscious working on your behalf, bringing you into alignment with what you've claimed in consciousness. It's not magic or mystery. It's law. It's the natural consequence of impressing your subconscious with a clear, emotionally charged mental image of your desired reality. And here's what I want you to understand with absolute clarity. This law is always working. It never takes a holiday. It never stops. Your subconscious mind is right now, this very moment, expressing outwardly whatever you've impressed upon it most consistently. If you're seeing lack in your life, it's because you've been impressing lack upon your subconscious. If you're experiencing limitation, it's because limitation has been your dominant mental diet. And if you're living in abundance and joy, it's because you've been feeding your subconscious mind with thoughts and feelings of abundance and joy. The question is never whether the law works. The question is, what are you impressing upon your subconscious right now? You see, most people live their entire lives in reverse. They look at their current circumstances, their bank account, their relationships, their health, and they allow those external conditions to dictate their internal states. They feel poor because they see an empty wallet. They feel lonely because they sleep in an empty bed. They feel sick because their body shows symptoms. But this is backwards. This is the tail wagging the dog. The true order is this: your inner mental and emotional state creates your outer circumstances, not the other way around. Your feelings don't come from your conditions. Your conditions come from your feelings, or more accurately, from the beliefs and mental images that generate those feelings. When you truly grasp this, when you really internalize this principle, everything changes. You stop being a victim of circumstance. You stop waiting for the world to change so you can feel better. Instead, you change your inner world first, and you watch with wonder as your outer world reorganizes itself to match. I've seen this happen thousands of times. A woman comes to me, desperate, broke, convinced the world is against her. I teach her this principle. She begins to imagine herself prosperous. She feels the feeling of financial security. She impresses this image upon her subconscious night after night, and within weeks, sometimes days, opportunities begin to appear. Money comes from unexpected sources. Doors open that were previously invisible. Was it magic? No. Was it coincidence? Absolutely not. It was law. It was the subconscious mind, now impressed with prosperity, expressing that prosperity through the only channels it knows: her thoughts, her actions, her awareness, her circumstances. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. The power to impress your subconscious mind with any image you choose, and to watch that image harden into fact in your life.